Welcome to the pursuit of wealth, where the H is surrounded by abundance. And today we want to welcome you with open hearts, open arms, and an open mind to what will be a very beautiful conversation. And today we have joining us Michaela Stone. Now, Michaela was born a traveler, a third culture kid, all grown up now, and a mom to two third culture kids. She has lived in 8 countries so far and jumped out of a perfectly good airplane to cure a fear of heights. We'll have to get into that. And was the mayor of Hell, Michigan for a day. Also that. Handing out exit visas to gangbangers. She has visited a number of countries in the Himalayas, traveling with a group of friends, including the Crown Princess of Sikkim for 2 weeks. She also enjoys tea, cookies, and a chat with King Ladakh. We'll have to repronounce that, in the Stock Palace, which is now a museum. She is happily married to a science fiction author and lives with him, 5 dogs and 5 cats in Southern Colorado. So welcome to the pursuit of wealth. That was a whole lot of good information. Where do we begin?
Let's go on board.
Let's do that.
I can't quite remember why I came up with the idea of jumping out of an airplane, but I had such a fear of heights, I couldn't even climb up to change a light bulb. Like I'd get very wobbly and it was really bothering me a lot. So I thought, okay, what can I do that's just gonna get rid of this? And somehow the idea of jumping out of a plane came to me. So I went and did the training, which in itself was an experience. And then on the day, got in this little plane and there were, I think, 4 of us. And the guy who was the instructor said, you got to know you're not coming down with this plane. Okay. You are not coming down with this plane. And I was like, okay. And then when it was my turn, and of course I was the last one to jump, I was just in the process of saying, you know what? I think I'm just gonna boof. There was this foot up my backside and I was out the plane. So that was how I got to do the jump. It was more of I was more encouraged than you might like to think. And I ended up getting second closest to the target of the day, but I never actually saw the target. I was so busy looking around and, experiencing the jump. So it was very cool.
Did it cure your fear of height?
It did. Yeah, I mean, I can change a light bulb now.
Yeah.
I still get a little wobbly if I'm at the edge of a cliff, but yeah, it did.
I've done 2 tandem jumps before, and I have to say I would go again in a heartbeat. It's such an experience. It changes you, and the perspective you get once the chute opens. It's amazing, that sensation, isn't it?
It's really, yeah. And I didn't jump with anybody attached to me. So I literally at one point had nothing touching anything. If you get what I mean? Like normally some part of you is touching the ground or you're in the water, you're touching something. And I wasn't touching anything. And that is the weirdest experience, to not be anchored. And I had thoughts going through my head like, what happens if I get stuck to the plane? And I'm kind of looking up and the parachute looked like it was doing this. And I thought, well, I don't like that, so I'm not going to look at that. That's helpful, right? And so I just didn't look at it, and that helped that. And yeah, I was just sort of, then it occurred to me that this was absurd. I'm in the middle of the air doing nothing. So I started to laugh, and then laughing was absurd. So I laughed harder, and I was just like howling by the time I hit the ground. It was, anybody watching must have thought I was having an issue, but it was just an experience.
That's beautiful. It really is beautiful. So outside of jumping out of planes, what else drives you? What else makes your heart pump?
Well, I love to travel. That's my happy space. It's what I've always done. I've been moving since I was 6 months old. I love coaching people. Like that's huge. I get as much benefit as they do from coaching. I really love the aha moment when I'm trying to coach somebody through their mindset where they're stuck, they can't see how to move forward. And then you see the moment where it's like, oh, gotcha. So that's what, I can think about, or I can look at, or where to go next. And then it's like, oh, it's on. And if I can do both, then that would be my definition of heaven right there.
You mentioned that you traveled a lot since you were 6 months old.
Mm.
I also traveled, well, moved quite a few times and traveled later on in life. Was that due to family? Was that just choice? Was your family travelers, or was there for job, military?
Lots. So my family were travelers to start off with. So we moved from the UK to Australia. I grew up there, back to the UK, then all around the UK. Then fairly early on in adulthood, I decided, I don't particularly want to stay here all the time. I need to go out and do things. So I was a tropical diseases nurse at that point. So the best place to go with that, I thought, was Southeast Asia. So I went off with a backpack, and I haven't lived in the UK since. So I've traveled because I like to travel. And then having kids as I'm traveling, every country we lived in, I would just look and see, okay, what do I need to do here? And I would do that. So my CV looks really kind of, okay, where is the thread? The thread is that it worked for where I
CVs are
was.
superficious at this time.
Yeah.
You said Southeast Asia too. How long ago was that?
Oh, longer than I would like to think. I guess the
Okay.
last place I lived was Malaysia, and I left there in 2012. That
Okay,
was
it's not
last
too.
part of Southeast Asia. But I've lived in Bangladesh and Singapore and Malaysia. Total of 10 years, but chunks.
Sure. Okay, so I'm in Vietnam right now. That's why I ask, because I'm fascinated. I came here about 3 years ago, and just within 3 years, there's been so much built up of modernization that I can't even imagine 10 years ago or 15 years ago. I was living in Hanoi just for a year, and there were 3 malls built. There were 4 or 5 skyline buildings that were built, as well as they're remodeling all of the old apartment buildings from the wartime. They have a plan in the next 10 years. A lot of reconstruction, and that's not even the business center.
Wow.
So I'm just wondering, for the 10 years that you lived in Southeast Asia, what have you seen? What kind of progress have you seen?
Well, first of all, the first place that leaps to mind is Singapore changes continuously. For a small island, they are incredible. The city planning has to be seen to be believed. When you're walking around at street level, you don't get the impression that this is an absolutely jam-packed island. They've got trees everywhere. You can walk and enjoy your walk, and it's amazing. The architecture is also very impressive. You have so many different styles. But when they built that, is it Marina Sands, that huge hotel? If you haven't seen it, Google it. It's mind-blowing.
I've been there, of course.
Okay, well, yeah, you're not that far away. But
Yeah.
wow, so if even you leave 6 months and come back, and there's different things there. So Singapore's like, it's ongoing all the time. It's quite amazing. Other places, yeah, when you travel, it's like I traveled to Bhutan, and I went there in 2004. And since then, they've built a whole new road. Now, that might not sound like much, but when I went there, they had one road. And you just kind of, one road through Bhutan. Now they have at least 2. That opens things up a lot. I think everybody was still wearing national dress when I was there. I don't know if they still are, but I suspect some things have changed. Yeah, it's interesting when you go back to a place after a few years. It's always different. And I when I was in Vietnam, visiting there, I was mostly in the south, so Ho Chi Minh. And that was changing, like while you sit there drinking your coffee, it's changing. So,
Much
That's
like
beautiful.
people, how we change throughout our lives. We change perspectives, we change the way we dress, our perceptions, our views. So
Yeah. And I love the fact that you are just one of the most hungry people for knowledge and study who I've ever met. How many degrees have you got, or how many certifications have you got? Do you have a running total?
No, I mean, I have, hang on, no, hang on. I have 4 degrees. I'm working on my 5th. I'm doing a doctoral program right now. And certificates, though, I have 3 with the American Council on Exercise. I don't have group instruction. I have the Life Coach School, Mad Dog Athletics for spinning, and more that I have forgotten.
Precision nutrition.
Precision nutrition level, precision nutrition level 2. There you go. See, I'm doing a Doctor of Behavioral Health program. It's called the Cummings Graduate Institute, and they're based in Arizona, but USA. But all of their programs are online fully, and they were way before the pandemic. There are a few universities that do it, including Arizona State University, but this institute it's different. It's really different. They call themselves the Disruptors. The mascot is the Pegasus, which is a flying pig. So, you know, when pigs fly. And the whole idea is that you take a healthcare system that currently is frankly broken, and you find gaps in it and fix them. So you come up with something that nobody's doing right now. And a Doctor of Behavioral Health, the idea is that we go into an integrated healthcare system, or we help create one, so that you can work with people. So for example, if somebody comes in with diabetes and they want to see their primary healthcare physician, the physician has maybe 15 minutes to talk to them, tops. That's if they're running on time. Maybe the problem for this person is adherence to a dietary program, or maybe they're having trouble with their medications, or maybe it's movement, maybe they're not getting the exercise. There's behavioral issues in there that if a Doctor of Behavioral Health can work with them, they don't need to see the primary care physician, and they don't need more medications. A behavioral modification can help. And one alumni from the school, she's actually working with a hospital in Brazil. She splits her time between New York and Brazil. And her goal was to have them reduce how much medication they give to psychiatric patients by implementing behavioral care instead. And in 2 years, they've reduced the amount of medication they prescribe by 50% with good effect. It's not just withholding medication, but replacing it with behavioral techniques. And I think that, that's incredible. That speaks to what's possible.
So how long have you, or did you just start this doctoral program, or?
Yeah, I'm actually in my 1st semester, but I already have some ideas for where I'm going. I know what my project's going to be. And we're already getting into some research, which is just, it's so cool. And they're open to anything. If it hasn't been done before, you give it a go. And if it doesn't work, pivot and find something else, find another way. Or, it's not like a typical program where, think about it, with PhD, for example, have you ever seen a student get through their PhD with research that didn't work? The results are always positive, right?
Right.
And so there's a lot of pressure. Like, you have to have the thing that works. Excuse me. In this program, they say, well, give it a go. If it doesn't work, let's figure out what we can do. And I love that attitude. It's like everything is possible. I'm also a Board Certified Behavior Analyst. So I guess I should mention that in the certificates too, because that's kind of big. And I work with kids with autism in that capacity. So a lot of kids with autism and adults have hypermobility. And it's not really, you don't really pay attention to it, but you see kids doing all kind of bendy things, and it's just like, oh yeah, that's just little Fred, that's what he does. But there is a condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, or EDS for short, with hypermobility. And that has a lot of other things with it that can cause chronic pain. My thought is some of these kids with autism that also have hypermobility and possibly Ehlers-Danlos have chronic pain. Their behaviors could come from that. And if we're treating with applied behavior analysis or any other treatment on top of pain, it's not going to be effective. So I hope that wasn't too complicated, but that's kind of where I'm going. I want to work out an assessment tool so that anybody, the behavioral health person, the psych, or the physical health person, the primary care physician, can figure out, okay, this kid is likely to have pain going on because of the way their joints move. And at the very least, if you can identify the hypermobility, then there's certain behaviors that can be changed so that injury is reduced, the risk of injury. Because, for example, if you're doing yoga, somebody with hypermobility can stretch into a position that they can't necessarily get out of. The joints aren't strong enough to pull you back. Well, if you get into that position and then pull back about 10 or 15% and hold that, that's a safer thing. So there's lots of little tweaks, but you have to know the person needs it.
You and I have had some interesting conversations about different approaches to kids with autism and the whole behavior spectrum.
Sure. Well, I do two different things. So I do coaching for parents, excuse me, and that I can bring different types of therapy in. Like I'm studying all the time, as you know, so I've studied polyvagal theory and a few other things that will help to know, and I can use this with parents. As a board certified behavior analyst, I can only use applied behavior analysis. So that gives a bad reputation in some areas, and I think it's because of how it used to be. But these days, it's a much more human approach. And basically, every behavior has something that happens before that causes the behavior. So, can't think of an example right now, but something happens, you do the behavior, and then there's a result. The result is either going to encourage you to do that again, or it's going to encourage you to not do that again. And the job of a behavior analyst is to figure out, okay, what are you doing? You can see the what, why. What are you trying to get? Are you trying to get away to something? Are you trying to get to something? And then for a kid with autism that can't necessarily explain what they want, our job is to figure out what they're looking for and then find a more functional way for them to get it. So for example, if I want your attention and I'm saying, hey, pick me, teachers likely to not be thrilled with the classroom full of kids doing this. So you want to encourage the child, instead of jumping up and down, just sort of do this. And you reward that, you kind of respond to that to encourage them to do it more. And the earlier you can work with the kids and the families, the less behaviors you need to see in the first place. What
started your journey towards coaching and helping people? Where did that begin?
I think I started coaching before I realized I was coaching. It was one of those things where I'd have a friend that was going through a divorce, and she's sad, and well, sad is an understatement, but I'm a Brit, so she's going through all of that, and what do I do? And so I'd sit there and just kind of talk her through it, and then another situation would come up, and I'd talk that person through it, and no, I just kind of I've always done it. I'm just like somebody that likes to get to the bottom of what's going on and see if we can find a way to improve that. Coaching itself, I think it just sort of, I don't know, I got into fitness. Yeah, I got into fitness, and then from fitness you get into health coaching. From health coaching you get into all kinds of coaching. And as a board certified behavior analyst, one of the things you do is work with parents to coach them on how to respond to their kids. And I love that part.
And what has been enlightening through that process of looking at both sides, from the parents and also the kids, what have you found that's enlightening that maybe is a common, maybe disassociation, or what most commonly is, what's the right word? Most commonly just not seen, or not seen in the right way?
I am so glad you asked me that, because this is like,
I don't know how to word it. My apologies.
No, but I can run with it. I'm so happy you asked me that. Understanding communication. And I definitely want to explain that. So parents to any kid, not just a child with autism, but any child, be polite. You know, grandma's coming, be polite. Okay, if I asked all three of you to write down your definition of what be polite means, I'll bet we would have 3 different definitions. But we expect the kids to know what that means, and we never define it. So that's one example. Another one is your child has 2 pot lids and they're banging them together, making a whole lot of noise, because that seems like a satisfying thing to do. So the parent says, stop that. I don't want to hear that anymore. You're giving me a headache. So the kid goes off. Okay, that was clear enough. Stop that. So they go off and they find something else to, you know, bang a hammer on the wall. I don't know, something that makes noise. I just told you to stop that. Why are you doing that? Well, no, you didn't. You told them to stop banging the lids. You're expecting the child to make a transference of understanding that the thing you don't want is the noise, but you didn't say that. So there's a lot of communication that happens that we think the kids get it, but stop that does not tell the child what you want them to do. It just tells them not to do exactly that thing. So, you know, and there's a lot of miscommunication there. Then the child's like, but I did what you said, you know, why are you mad at me? And they're confused and upset. The parent thinks, you know, you did that deliberately, and they get all annoyed and upset, and there's a whole blow up. And actually there was a miscommunication. The parent didn't say what they meant.
I have a 5-year-old daughter. She's 5.5. And upon having her, parenting has become of the utmost importance to me. And it's one of the reasons why I have been on such a journey to heal myself, because when I'm healing myself, I'm not only healing for her, but generations beyond that. And I love what you're saying about that language. I identify with that so much, because you're so right. We hold children to such high standards that we don't even hold for ourselves. You just sit there, put your hands in your pocket and be quiet. How could you ever tell a child that? That's not even something that you would do for yourself, you know?
Right.
And or like you said, when you're talking about polite, well, how about this one? Be good. Be good. What does that even mean? Well, I'm better than I was yesterday, so I must be being good. And it's just setting these children's for expectations that they can't even attain. And so I find it is just to be such a, through no intention of the parents, I'm sure, but the child is learning to not only not trust their actions, but trust themselves too, you know, in how they're receiving information and things like that. And, you know, talking to a child with respect is of the utmost importance to me, because if we can respect them, they can respect us. And I was just talking about this yesterday. We need to model for people in our lives how we want to be treated. And I need to do that for my daughter as well. And therefore, she can learn how to do that for her. You know, model the way that she wants to be treated. But, you know, when we hold these kids to these standards, it breaks my heart for the child. It truly does. And so I just think that that is such a beautiful thing. And I think that, you know, parents get into this world of children and parenting, but often what's missed is that actual pause to know, what kind of a parent am I going to be? How am I showing up for my child? If we did more of that, perhaps we wouldn't need much of your work in that regard. But seriously, you know,
treating them like people and not like robots, right? I mean, you can't follow commands and then develop as a creative, normal human being. But I think it isn't just with children. I think that's a big issue with all relationships, all humans, because we were talking about that yesterday as we started our New Year podcast together, and just, you know, about being clear and understanding and trying to understand from the other person's perspective what that might mean or what that might look like, instead of just saying, well, I told you, you know, you should know, if you love me, you should just know, right? Or I said it, so you should understand, even though sometimes we need things explained to us in 5 different ways before we get it, right?
Yeah, actually, I have one thing that I wanted to mention that I feel is so important for every parent to understand, and it's easy to miss. we create people pleasers when
Mm,
kids are very small. And one of the ways we do that, and this is huge for boys, girls, or anybody in between, that think of those situations where family are coming over for a visit, or you bump into somebody in the supermarket that you know, and they want to give your child a hug. And the child says, no, I really don't want to, that person smells of fish, or whatever it is. And we say, and you're mortified. Yeah, but that's grandma. You have to say hello, go and give them a hug. So what you're teaching in that moment is, first of all, the adult, who should be able to control their own emotions, the adult has more say over you than you do. Your body is not yours to decide about. If this person wants to touch you, they can, and you have no power. Now, kids don't have any power anyway, but they should be given what they can have, and autonomy over their own bodies to say, no, actually, I don't want to be in that person's space. This is something that, you can create a game plan, like, hey, family's coming over. If you don't want them to hug you, can you just squeeze my hand? Or can you, do some kind of signal that you two can recognize? And you can set that up from a pretty early age. Even when a kid's 3, if you want to say no, just squeeze my hand. They get that. And then when you back them up and say, oh, you know what? My child doesn't want to hug right now, but it's lovely to see you. How are you doing? And you take the subject away. That child is getting from you, hey, mom's protecting me. Dad's really there for me. I can trust them. And my body's mine to decide. This is so huge, and we don't think about it.
Mm.
And that's something I learned from my journey of working with kids and parents, observations, ABA, all those things. But that is exactly where you create people pleasers in later life, and it's so hard to recover from. How many people are in therapy because of this? So that's huge.
I am so, I so resonate with that. And, it's caused me a lot of guff over the years with my daughter, because it was something that I was very clear on. When you're an infant, yeah, I still have to make those choices for her. But when she's old enough, I don't ask her to say hi to people. Did you want to say hi? Okay, no problem. Did you want to respond? I try to give as much choice, and I always have. And it's interesting the amount of people that will be like, oh, she's just doing that because she's a mama's girl, or she doesn't want to get off your lap, or, and it's like, this is my child's safe space. Unequivocally, my arms are her safe space. She stayed in my arms till she was about 3.5, truly 4, before she really was like, okay, I'm going to go explore the world on my own. And I'm talking about going to people's houses where she would still just, I'm going to sit here till I know it's safe, and then I'll go out and play, but people get so upset about that. And you're so right about that. I mean, these kids have pretty little choice of their own. And so, just empowering them just a little, and especially with their bodies, that is so powerful to me. My daughter always says, Mama, can I, wear this? Well, what do you think? How does that look on you? And I say, she said to me yesterday, she's like, Mama, does this match? I said, well, what do you think? And she's like, well, I don't know. I said, honey, it's your body. It's your body, just yours. If you want to wear that, then wear it and look at yourself and smile. This is you. This is all for you. And it's so interesting. She goes to school with all the other kids, and the kids will say, their moms will say, well, I pick out my daughter's outfits, and, she has a hard time dressing in the morning. And I'm like, I haven't picked out an outfit for my daughter since before she was probably 1. I would even just put her in front of her drawer and let her pick it out. I didn't care what it was, but it's just about honoring that and giving them their voice in their safe space. So I just think that that's such a beautiful thing, the way that you stated that. It's so powerful. I can go on and on about what that means to me from a mom standpoint, but it's beautiful. Truly. I love that so much.
I have another pet thing, if you like, and then really I'll give you guys some space to talk. I could keep going.
Please, that's what it's here for.
Please
sharing, right? How often do we make kids share? But do you do that as an adult?
No.
If you just got yourself a brand new hat and, somebody comes up and says, oh, I want that. Are you going to say yes, or are you going to say, well, it's mine, so no? You know, like, but we expect kids to just give stuff up. And again, you're going straight back to creating that people pleaser. I mean, we do an amazing job of creating people pleasers. It's like, oh my God, if that was a goal, we would be rock stars, because it's, you know, okay, you have this thing, it's yours, you're playing with it, you're using it, but somebody comes up and wants it, so you have to give it to them. Wow. You know, like, way to give your lunch money away at school.
Right.
It just sets that person up for not feeling like they have any authority over anything. And we do this to our kids, trying to make them, you know, be nice and be good, so that other people think you're a good parent. But meanwhile, the kid is getting absolutely crushed. And then later in life, they're like, sure, you can have this. Oh, yeah, okay. Oh, okay, I have to hug you. You know, we've just given them every message that you would not consciously do. And we do it without realizing. So one of the first things I tell parents is, actually, know that so-and-so does not have to share. Don't make them share. You can teach them how to share and then give them a choice to share. But I'm afraid you're going to have to stare down the parents that glare at you when you say, you know, no, actually, she doesn't have to share.
Mm-hmm.
It's a concept.
Yeah, it's so hard for society to accept, though, truly, because a lot of that comes from, as a parent on the playground, everyone else is looking at me. And if my kid's the only one not sharing, then they're going to judge me, where it's like, no,
they do.
You stand up for
They
your
do.
kid and your kid alone. There, one of my friends she has a boy the same age as my daughter, and then had another boy. And so she's like, you know, the older boy, who's the same age as my daughter, he's not sharing his toys, and it's causing a lot of problems. And I was like, well, what about this? What about if you ask him, what toys can your little brother play with that are yours, that he can play with? Put some of those in a basket. And what are the toys that you don't want him playing with? And then it's also a message to the other boy to say, no, these are not yours. These are your brother's. But here are the toys that you guys can play together. And then here are the toys that the older boy can't play with, you know, because these are the younger boy's toys. And it's so empowering, because everyone there has a choice now. These are your toys that, you know, that you can have, that are just yours. These are the ones that you've said it's okay to, you know, for both of you to play with. But it's such an empowering thing, instead of just saying, well, you're just kind of being a little jerk, look it up spelling, you know, because you don't want to share your toys, when that's not the message that you want to send, right? It's about having that agency over yourself. And you're right, these children have so little agency over themselves, truly, because we're always telling them what to do, when to do it, how to do it, and how fast, how quickly to get it done.
And to be fair, parents, that's our role, is to tell kids how they need to do things and why and when. That's how they learn. But also giving them choices where they can have them is just, it starts decision making early on. You know, one of my favorites is, well, do you want to wear the red t-shirt or the green t-shirt? The choice is not, do you want to get dressed? That's one of those open-ended questions that any self-respecting kid is going to say, no. You know, of course they are. They have to test their boundaries. That's how they know where they are. So if you give them a choice, in ABA, you actually call it a forced choice, because they only get to choose between these two things. There's no pressure, but, you know, it's like, do you want this one or this one? Oh, I'll have that one.
Also marketing hack. It's using marketing all the time.
And it works.
It does. It works very well, because you're tying them into a choice, but in a structure that you allow it to.
Right.
One more thing of living across the world, as you've seen, there's a lot of different approaches to raising families, to raising kids, behavior techniques that parents use. Difference between living in the city, living in the country, from living in Japan or Malaysia or in the United States. So having lived in all of these countries, were you able, or I'm sure you were, to be able to notice the difference in psychology or family raising tactics that you have grown to appreciate, or that you've noticed differences that you integrate into your own practice, into raising?
Absolutely. And
Okay.
actually, I was looking at my coaching clients the other day and realizing, wait a minute, I've got somebody in New Zealand, I've got somebody in Canada, another one in Singapore, and my time zones are all over the place. I'm like, okay, so where am I with this one? And I love working with people from different places because that kind of keeps me current, and it just reminds me of places I've lived and so on. But the key when I'm coaching someone, and we'll keep parenting, seeing as that's what we've been on for a while, is what works for you? What do you want to see from your child? And how can we get you all there? Because, if you want a certain behavior from your child, there are different ways to achieve it. And punishment, particularly smacking the kid, is never helpful. It teaches the child that you're not safe. It teaches the child that when you're angry, you hit people, and it teaches them fear. And it also teaches them how to be really sneaky. Like, give me somebody who has been smacked as a child or beaten as a child, and I will give you a very sneaky adult. They know how to do things and not get caught, because that's what hitting teaches you. So given the different cultural backgrounds, then I have to change my message, not from the end result, which is don't hit, but why not? And then also working with that parent on how to work with their parents. Because quite often, if you grew up being hit, for example, when you tell your parents you're not going to do that with your child, oh, didn't I raise you right? Oh, you don't like the way I did things? And they take it as a very personal slight. So I then go into acceptance commitment therapy, funnily enough, and teach that to the parents so that they can work on it with their parents and get everybody to a place of, I'm not dissing your parenting. I mean, you could, but let's not go there. I'm not dissing your parenting. I'm just saying this is what I'm choosing. And this is why, and this is how, and, just laying out the boundaries. And boundaries are huge for everybody from birth to death. We have to have boundaries. And if you don't state them, it's not a boundary. You need to be clear on those boundaries, whether it's with your child, with your parent, with your partner. You all have to know where you stand. And for kids, their job, and they have all day for this, is to push the boundaries. So for a parent that says, okay, if you don't come right now while we're in this store, I'm going to leave you. Well, you're not going to leave them, right? So that doesn't happen. So the child learns not to listen to you because you say stuff and you don't mean it. There's a boundary that just didn't get set. So the next time the child wants to do something and you say, well, I'm going to leave you, they do it more, right? Like, now what are you going to do? They're testing to see what's your reaction going to be. How safe are you? How solid are you? And what happens when I do this? What happens when they have to do that. And people who grow up without those kind of boundaries in a very permissive household that just, okay, yeah, whatever you want to do, and the kids run amok and what have you, those adults have a lot of difficulties because they don't know where they end and somebody else begins. They don't know how to respect another person's boundaries because they were never taught. And we have a lot of adults out there right now that they don't know how to use critical thinking because they weren't taught. They don't know how to respect another person for their opinions or their boundaries. And we have a societal mess going on right now because this isn't being taught enough or at all. So I love for that to be taught to kids. And it makes the parenting so much easier. If you set a boundary, it's tough in the beginning to keep it because the child has to push. They have to know that it's real. Once they finish pushing, you're good. You've said it. Just keep it. Occasionally they'll test it, but not very often. And then you can move on,
So much is so true to that. And I just can tell you, just from my own experience, I've never, in her 5.5 years, never put my daughter in a timeout. I've never needed to.
Right.
Because a lot of times when she was being emotional, I offered love instead of punishment, because a lot of times their needs aren't being met when they're emotionally charged. Their needs aren't being met. But the interesting thing is, it's also a boundary, because I say, do you want a hug? No? Okay. Well, if you do want a hug, I'll be right out here. Do you want to talk? No. Well, if you do, Mama will be right out here whenever you're ready. And that is also how to help set those boundaries and define them for them. But it's so true what you say about that. When we send out these threats, because that's kind of what they are, right?
Yeah.
With no follow through, you can't expect your child, they're not going to just comply. Oh, so you will leave me. I don't want that. They don't have that even conscious thought, right? Like you said, they're there to push them and push them and push them. And, I can tell you it is hard. And my mom always said that too. She always says, you don't start parenting at 12.
Right.
You don't start parenting at 15. You don't start parenting at 7. You start the day that they're born, and again, with that love, I think love is the ultimate piece to that. They just want to be loved and feel safe and connected. And boundaries too. When we talk about boundaries, our kids love us more for them. They might not in that moment, but they will love us for them. Because when we don't, like you said, there's children out there who are growing up to be very unresilient adults.
Yes, because they're not learning coping skills. They're not learning to deal with no. And wow, there's so many people that don't know how to deal with no. It's scary. And it's a fundamental skill that we need to teach kids when they're little and reinforce it as they grow up. And decision-making skills too. Autonomy as much as possible. As the child gets older, how many things can you decide for yourself? And if you've given them enough information as they grow, then you can give them your trust to say, well, the way I look at it is, if you do this, this could be the result. And if you do that, that could be the result. Which one do you want to do? Or I don't know, how do you see it going? It depends on the age of the child, but some back and forth there and some trust ultimately that, well, you'll make a good decision. I'll leave it with you. Let me know how that goes.
And allow them to fail from time to time.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's something I have to work with parents on a lot. Is you cannot use bubble wrap. We all want to. Yes, I have 2 kids myself. We all want to do the bubble wrap thing, but some of you, if each of you think of like a huge lesson you've learned, chances are that ties back to a really negative experience. So sometimes if you can sort of forget the pain of the lesson, but keep what you learned, that's growth. Staying in the pain of the thing is where you get stuck and you need help and therapy or coaching or something. But, just taking, okay, so that's what not to do. Or, okay, I didn't like that. I'm not doing that again. This is growth. This is how you learn what you're going to do. So we have to let people fail. Yes.
Yeah.
Kids and adults.
Both. And the big thing in my life that comes to mind is when I was 19, I lost my mother to cancer. And she was an amazing woman, very kind. I mean, everybody still speaks so highly of her. They remember her 38 years later. But she wanted me to have a childhood that I didn't have to worry about anything. And as part of that, I was overprotected and I had no coping skills. So when she was sick, I did everything I could to escape from it instead of understanding and going through that process with her. When she died, I had no coping or grieving skills. I didn't know how these feelings were coming and I didn't know what to do with them. And there were things that I carried for years and years because I never learned how to process it. And I think that's something like failure. We have to teach kids. I mean, you can't just say, okay, well, somebody's going to die and you're going to go through these 7 stages of grief and whatever, but we can teach them some of those coping skills through smaller steps. I think it's also really important.
And model
that.
for them, model for them failure too. Michaela, I'm curious if for any of our listeners right now, could you offer some, I don't know, however you could quantify it, however you'd want, but what is some, for the everyday parent, what is some advice that you can provide right now for them?
Okay, the thing that leaps to mind is pick your battles, particularly when it's somebody else's battle. An example I would love to give you right now for that is when my youngest child was toddler and he was going to a Montessori school. And at that time I was teaching Montessori. So, one of those job shifts to suit where my kids were at and the school I was at. But he wore Spider-Man all the time. And you couldn't get him out of Spider-Man. At that stage, it was like peeling his skin off. Like it was traumatic. I had 3, one to wash, one to wear, one to repair. And we just did that all the time. And one day I took him to school as Spider-Man, and his teacher said very sternly, we were in Belgium at the time, she was very stern, and she said, this is not acceptable. He has to come dressed in proper clothes. We cannot have this. So, I sort of, okay, just got a dressing down from the teacher. I went home with him and I looked at the situation. I thought, well, I can traumatize him, me, and everybody else in the vicinity and do this or not. So the next day I took him to school with a bag of clothes and he was dressed as Spider-Man. And I said, here you go. Good luck. And I left. And when I came back to pick him up, he looked perfectly fine. I was looking for signs of upset or anything. And no, he was cool. She, however, looked like she'd just been through World War III, was very, very stressed. And she didn't say a word. She just handed me the bag of clothes. And the subject went away. So this was something, if I was taking her concerns as being more important than my child or my home, I would have put us all through trauma in order to make her happy. And he probably would have acted out all day because he was upset. Instead, I gave it to her. It was her problem. So pick your battles. If you're feeling under pressure because other people are staring at you, or because people are telling you, well, you know what that kid needs is a good slap, or what that kid needs is X. Okay, thanks for your opinion that I didn't ask for. And, don't pay any attention to it. It's not their child. So that's a big piece, I would say, is pick your battles. You don't have to fix everything. Your kid is learning, they're experiencing, and that's how they grow. And other people's opinions, really, they're worth what they're written on,
You're a Montessori teacher too. That's amazing. My daughter goes to a Montessori school, so I think it's a beautiful thing.
Montessori teaching, I'm a former nurse, fitness, health coaching, and now I coach, and I bring all the things into my coaching. So I can coach from a nutrition aspect, fitness, mindset, parents, like what do you have? I'll coach it.
This is so beautiful. And I just want to thank you so much for coming on our podcast today. And I trust that there's a episode 2 or a part 2 of this conversation. Absolutely. I think
or
that
3
you have
or 4.
Yeah, so much more to
I'm
bring
game.
to the table. So we just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. And before we go, we just wanted to wrap up with our question. Johnny, would you care?
So in trying to sum up your crazy, amazing life, what are the 3 ingredients that you use that you would pass on to someone else?
I'm always
your
curious.
recipe.
I'm always curious, so I will try anything. Pretty much. Yeah. There's not a lot that I wouldn't be prepared to try, food or otherwise. A big one is if you don't ask, the other person can't say yes. And that's gotten me into all kinds of interesting situations, which follows up with the third one, which is say yes now, you can always say no later. And that also gets me into some really interesting situations. But it's been very good, because sometimes you can hesitate and say, well, I'm really not sure. And the opportunity slips by. But if you say, yeah, sure, I'm on, and then you can think about it. And, hey, the worst that happens is you say, I changed my mind.
You find out it doesn't align with you. And then you have that opportunity to say no, which is also trust within yourself, which is a powerful thing as well. An option.
And if I can give a fourth one, because I'm not good at rule following.
Exactly.
Decision making. I have a
love
trick
it.
for decision making that I give to kids, adults, anybody that wants to listen. And that is, if you have some choices to make one. Just decide something and really mean it. And then see how that feels, because you'll know it's either going to be, yeah, but you know, there was this other thing. And if you're not sure, make the other decision and see how that feels. One of them is going to resonate and one of them isn't. And you can sleep on it, take a couple of days, whatever you need. But that's the best decision-making tool I've ever come across. I use it with other people and it works. You just have to make a decision. For example, if you're shopping, you know, hey, if that pair of shoes is really expensive, but I like them, I don't know, I don't need them. Yeah. So a decision you could make is, well, if somebody else came up and bought those while I'm standing here, how would I feel? And if the answer is, you know, I'm going to chase them and grab the shoes back, then maybe you want them. Maybe you should go for them. And if the answer is, that's okay, then you don't need them, don't get them. You know, it's a tool to make a decision.
I'll be using that this week.
Cool.
Yeah.
But clarity
Let me know how it
and
goes.
simplicity, right? Clarity and simplicity.
Oh, simple is good. Man, when people overcomplicate things or overthink them, if you're taking too long, you're taking too long.
Queen here.
Well, I happen to know a coach.
That's great. And so where can people find you?
On my website that I hope you've got there, because
Yes, we do.
Mikki at thecompassionatecoach.com. I'm in the process of changing my website, but there are some blogs there. You'll find a lot of parenting stuff on there at the moment. That's basically where to find me. I'm going to be setting up LinkedIn, and I'm not sure what else yet, but go to the website.
You have a podcast yet?
I don't. Shall I hang out here?
Yeah, right.
I could hang out with you guys.
That's
I'll
right. You
encourage
could.
you.
Well, thank you so much. We're so deeply honored that you took time out of your day to come have a chat with us. And like I said, and I think we all agree, we'd love to have you on another time. And we know that the conversation will be just as powerful as it was today. So thank you so much for giving us your time, and we look forward to next time.